On Tuesday, April 24th, local voters will head to the polls for the special election to fill the New York State Senate seat vacated when George Latimer became Westchester County executive. Two women are vying to represent the 37th district in a race some call a bellwether for fall congressional races. For this week's roundtable, Mike Witsch sat down with Republican Julie Killian and Democrat Shelley Mayer.
Julie Killian, thank you so much for spending some time with us. Tell us about yourself.
I'm running for state senate because I believe there's a problem in Albany. It's broken, it's dysfunctional, and I believe I can go up there and shine the light on that and get things done and provide, most importantly, provide a new perspective, a fresh perspective with new ideas. And I have lived in Westchester almost my whole life. I was born here, and I've decided I'm going to stay here and fight for New York. I have lived in Rye for 27 years. I'm the mother of 5. I have a degree in chemical engineering from Notre Dame and an MBA from NYU. I worked in finance. But I've been home raising my kids for the last 25 years and involved in a lot of local organizations, both in Rye and in the county, and really advocating for kids and people for a long time. In my last 6 years, I was on the Rye City Council, last 2 of those as deputy mayor. And those, I've also started Rye Act, Rye Action for Children and Teens, which is a drug and alcohol coalition very similar to Radar. Radar, I work with them. I've worked with them before. And it's really those perspectives, the on-the-ground perspective of the mother being involved and having a better sense of what's going on in the community that I want to bring to Albany. And I do think there's many people up there out of touch on both sides of the aisle. And I feel like we need that fresh perspective up there. Okay,
let's get to some issues. Some critics have tied you to former county executive Rob Astorino and the Trump administration. Can you talk back to these critics?
Sure.
And do you have any plans to alleviate the dysfunction in Albany?
I just want to be really clear. I have never met Donald Trump, ever. And I feel like whatever comes out of Washington that's good for us, we can support. And whatever's coming out of there that's not good for us, we need to push back on. As far as Rob Astorino, yes, I have been a longtime supporter of Rob. But if you go back and look at my city council record, I always do what's right for the community. So I have voted to sue the county and voted not to sue the county. And it's always about what is right for the constituents. At that point, it was what is right for Rye. Right now, it's like what is right for the constituents of the 37th district. So I don't really care what party you are, Republican, Democrat. What's important is you do the right thing for the community. And I have shown to be an independent voice. Ask anybody in Rye, I think they'll tell you that. So that's what I plan on doing up in Albany. There is tremendous dysfunction up there. That's one of the reasons I'm running. And there is a lot of things we can do to make it more affordable, have better opportunity in the business world, and safety and security for our residents. And those are the 3 things that I talk about all the time. And there has been years and years and years of rules and regulations piling on that make the system totally rigged against the taxpayer and against our citizens. And that really has to stop, because I think New York is at a tipping point.
Well, let's talk about taxes. In light of the new federal tax law and the limitation on our SALT deduction, how do you envision easing the tax burden on the people of Westchester?
I want to add one thing from the last question. You didn't say, but I'm going to say because it's out there. I have also been tied to the NRA. I never, ever have taken $1 from the NRA, directly or indirectly. So just wanted to get that out there. Taxes. Our taxes are too high. We need to make our community affordable. And one of the big reasons is we don't get our fair share of school aid in Westchester. We get $5,200 per student. Long Island gets $6,400, the city $9,600. And there's a direct correlation between getting the least per student and having the highest taxes. The corruption tax, I call it, and there's both legal corruption and illegal corruption, and the legal corruption is almost worse, which again is that sort of regulatory morass and antiquated work rules that combine to make everything here more expensive. And we just need to start to get at that, because when I walk neighborhoods every day, the biggest thing I hear is, I don't know what to do because I can't afford my taxes anymore, or I can't afford to retire here. I have to leave, but I don't know where to go. And that's what we need to really focus on.
Let's talk about the schools. What do you think are the greatest issues facing our public schools and their funding, and how do you propose solving those issues?
Well, as I said, getting our fair share of school aid. One of the reasons we don't is because we have this labor coefficient that is aligned with upstate labor costs, and we have downstate labor costs. And so that's one of the big reasons that we get less than other people. But the other thing is that there is also, part of the formula is also antiquated when you're looking at special ed, and particularly English language learners, and I know there's a lot in the Mamaroneck community, and they have some formula and some number that they compensate for that's like 10 or 20 years old. It doesn't make any sense. And there's a lot of things in Albany like that, where they just don't keep up with what the current situation is. And you know, we have these great kids in our community, we need to educate them. So when you're not getting the appropriate compensation for special ed or English language learners, you have to pull it from some other area. And then it's not fair to these kids. So we need to help all these kids. And you know, they say Westchester is wealthy, and that's one of the other reasons that we don't get the funding that we need. And it is wealthy, but like I know even at Mamaroneck Avenue Pre-K, I think 80% of the kids qualify for free lunch. So that's you know, that we need to get them what they need. And I have a soft spot in my heart for Mamaroneck Avenue Pre-K because my son went to the special ed Pre-K there, and I love them dearly. They were so helpful to me in a time of need. So. Go Mamaroneck Avenue School. A
minute ago you mentioned the NRA. What is your position on the current gun laws, and what changes, if any, would you advocate?
I feel strongly that we do need to focus on those and get things done, and I'm thrilled that the kids in Parkland and the local kids are really keeping this issue in the forefront because they are going to force us adults to do the right thing. In New York, we had the SAFE Act passed a long time ago that got rid of assault weapons, and it also added a mental health component to the background checks. So we need to make sure the background check system works, universal background checks. We need to ban bump stocks, and the extreme risk protection orders, which a lot of people are talking about. I am absolutely in favor of that passing, which takes guns away from family members that are mentally ill. We also need to raise the age to buy a gun. It's federal 21 handgun. It needs to be 21 for all, I think. And there's also a piece that not enough people are talking about, but it's called Kendra's Law, which is already passed, and we need to push Albany to make it permanent. The Assembly has pushed back on that. The Senate Republicans want it, and that's the companion to the Extreme Risk Protection Order, and it allows you to get mental health services, court-mandated mental health services, either inpatient or outpatient, for your loved ones that are mentally ill. So we need to look at all those things. But what we really need to do is look at the root causes of what's happening. We've had 3 knife attacks in Westchester in the last few months. 2 of them were fatal. And sadly, a young man from Rybrook was killed up at Binghamton over the weekend with a knife. And so it's really about how do we help our kids that are struggling before they get to the point where they're turning to violence, guns, drugs. So that's where my passion lies, in helping the kids and helping the communities deal with early intervention. I think early intervention is really important.
Okay. Can you offer some final words to the voters?
I want to go up to Albany because I want to make a difference and I want to get things done. I'm big on, I see a problem. I saw a problem in 2011 with marijuana in Rye, brought people together, created the coalition, got the federal funding. We have a lot of great programs that we put into Rye. So when I first got on city council, scandals erupted, put in a conflict of interest policy. So I see a problem and I get things done, and I work across the aisle. There's problems on both sides up there, and we just need the fresh perspective for somebody to go up there and push back on the status quo. I'm not afraid. I'm pretty fearless when it comes to that. I don't need this job. I want this job. So I'm not afraid to go up there and push some buttons, and whether it's my party or another party, I don't care what party anybody is, Democrat, Republican, Independent, whatever it is, we got to work together. New York is at a tipping point, and we need to help people in our communities with affordability and opportunity in the business sector, so we can, everybody has jobs. Our seniors can afford to stay there. Our kids coming out of college can afford to stay, because that's what makes the vibrant community, and that we can afford to help make our schools safe. And we didn't get into infrastructure in the schools, but there's a lot of things up there we can do for that.
Well,
so thank you.
Thank you very much for spending a few minutes with us on The Local Live.
Thank you so much for having me.
Shelley Mayer, welcome to The Local Live. Take a minute to tell us about yourself.
Well, thank you so much for having me here. I am the Democratic candidate for the special election, 37th Senate District, next Tuesday, April 24th. Hope people go out and vote, exercise their right. I'm currently an Assemblywoman since 2012 in the 90th Assembly District, which is in the city of Yonkers. I grew up in Northeast Yonkers, lived in White Plains for 18 years in the Highlands, and then when my parents couldn't manage the house, moved back to Yonkers. I love my community. I love Westchester. I'm thrilled to live here. I think it's an extraordinary place. I'm a very optimistic person, notwithstanding the challenges we have. I've been married for 39 years. I have 3 wonderful children. 2 are married, and I'm fortunate to have 3 beautiful grandchildren under the age of 2.5. So a certain degree of chaos in my house when they're all there, which is the best kind of chaos. And I'm running really because I believe that I can carry on sort of the tradition of George Latimer, and an activist Democratic legislator standing for progressive values, but very capable of talking to everyone, not afraid of disagreement, representing diverse communities, and really fighting for the people of this district in the sort of strong way that you need. That, coupled with my experience, I think makes me the strongest candidate.
Okay, let's talk about some issues. Taxes, for instance.
Yes.
In light of the new federal tax law and the limitation on the SALT deduction, how do you envision easing the tax burden on your constituency?
Well, I'm very, very concerned about that. Probably this district gets hit harder than any Senate district in the state. In the last bill we did in the state budget, there were 2 proposals which were adopted, which were efforts to minimize the impact of this tax bill, which I would point out is simply really a penalty against states that voted Democratic. And that's who gets hit, because they have the highest property taxes above $10,000. So we had 2 sort of solutions that are not perfect. One is to create charitable entities that you could donate your local tax, your school tax, and take a charitable deduction. And the other is to change the employee payroll tax to an employer payroll tax, thereby reducing your pay a little bit, but you wouldn't have to count it in that amount that you're going to go up to get try to get below $10,000. Almost everyone in this county has a property tax and income tax, if added together, in excess of $10,000. So it's a problem. I would point out that these provisions were in a bill that I actually voted against, even though I support them, because it had a pay raise commission, and I'm opposed to that unless we couple it with ethics reform. But I support these provisions that the governor put forward, and I think we have to come up with some creative solutions. We cannot afford to have higher taxes, property tax.
Your critics have tied you to Governor Cuomo and the dysfunction in Albany. Can you address these critics and advise what your plans might be to alleviate the dysfunction in Albany in the future?
Well, in first place, I'm proud to be a supporter of Governor Cuomo and appreciate his support of me. He is a can-do governor. I mean, he got this bridge done that nobody thought could be done. He helped us get a higher minimum wage and get paid family leave, and there's a lot of very terrific things that we in the legislature did in concert with him. There are things that need to be fixed in Albany, not related to the governor, that I strongly support. I'm for the change in campaign finance and getting rid of the limited liability corporation loophole that allows you to have 50 corporations and each one gives the maximum, even though they're not real corporations. I think that's wrong. I'm for a limit on outside income or a ban on outside income for legislators. I think there should not be a conflict. I think it should be a full-time job. That's how I've treated it. I think you basically have to say, this is what I want to do. I'm for changes in the campaign finance and disclosure laws to limit our the amount you can give to a lower amount so that more people can participate. And for changes in our sexual harassment policy so that the reporting goes to outside agencies and they investigate claims. So there's a lot of things I would do to change it. I've stood up to people of my own party on repeated occasions. I'm happy to do that if I have to. I'm not afraid of anyone. And I will do what's right for the people of the district and what's right for me personally as a person who I believe, has lived my life with integrity.
Okay, schools.
Yes.
Our public schools. What do you think are the greatest issue facing our public schools and funding, and how would you propose solving some of these issues?
Well, I've spent the last 6 years in the Assembly pretty much only fighting for the Yonkers public schools, which drastically underfunded and need money from the state every year. Every year that I've been there, we've gotten substantially more. We got $15 million more this year above the prior year. Not enough, but I understand how the situation works with school funding. The fact is you need to be a real advocate for every district, whether it's Mamaroneck or whether it's Portchester or even Bedford. Everyone needs a fighter for their school district and knows what they need and how to get the most. Some things in the formula are not fair to our Westchester County. We should change those. I've been on the forefront of trying to change them. While we do that, at the same time, you've got to be fighting for every district, for the kids and the parents and those that work in the schools. So I'm very committed to the detail and nitty-gritty of getting more money for the districts, at the same time making sure that the results of the money are the most for the taxpayer. We want to make sure we are getting good results. We have some extraordinary schools in this district and some that need to continue to improve in terms of outcome. I care about outcomes. As a parent of 3 kids, I care about outcomes. You want these kids to graduate high school as prepared and as well educated as possible.
Okay. What is your position on our current gun laws? And what changes, if any, would you advocate?
Well, I voted for the SAFE Act when we passed it after Sandy Hook. I was a sponsor. I was proud to do that. I'm proud that New York took a step that, frankly, other states and the nation should take in banning assault weapons. But it's not good enough after what we saw in Florida. There's a number of bills that I sponsor. They pass in the Assembly. The Extreme Risk Protection Order, the background, extending the waiting period from 3 to 10 days, banning bump stocks, and I have a bill that bans teachers from carrying guns and limits it to law enforcement. The fact is these bills cannot be passed in the Senate because the Senate Republican leadership won't allow them to be voted on. So my opponent can say she supports them, fine, but this is how the legislature works. The majority leader of the Senate decides what bills come to the floor. Twice this session alone, they have refused to allow these bills to come to the floor and be voted on, so that the Republicans don't have to take a vote. If the Democrats become the majority, which I hope is the case when I win, we're going to bring these bills to the floor and let people vote their conscience and vote the way they think. But give these bills a chance because we need to improve gun safety for our parents. We owe it to them.
Okay. Let me give you an opportunity then for a final minute and talk to the voters.
Well, one, I appreciate the opportunity to meet voters, to talk to them, to make sure they know what I stand for. And to understand my style, which is I believe in government. Government has a role. We have great opportunity to have a Democratic state Senate in the face of the challenges in Washington. I think it's a time for really a bulwark, a barrier against some of the very negative things that are happening at the national level. And that requires a Democratic Senate working with an assembly and a governor to do progressive things, whether it's voting reform, election reform, gun bills. These are the kinds of things that, frankly, until we have a Democratic Senate, we can't get done. But also the people of this district are entitled to an activist, a present legislator in the mold of George Latimer, or I would like to say myself in Yonkers, fighting for them, being present, listening to their concerns, and making sure that every person feels they are well served. It has nothing to do with party. At the end of the day, my job, if I win, will be to serve every constituent as well as I possibly can, because government can play a very valuable part in improving the lives of our community.
Would you remind people when voting day is?
Yes, thank you. Tuesday, April 24th from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. Same place you usually vote, no change. Just get out there and vote. Exercise the extraordinary right we have in this country to be able to vote.
Shelley Mayer, thank you so much for spending a few minutes with us on The Local Live.
Pleasure. Thank you.